There's this powerful saying I heard a few years ago that totally stood out to me, that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. I had the honor of recording episode number 19 of the Abundant Desi podcast with my very first guest. And this isn't just any guest, this is one of my dear friends, Annie Martin, who's been a part of my life for a very long time. And in this conversation that we have, which is entitled, You Do Not Need to Suffer in Silence, we have a very powerful back and forth conversation about her journey and what she went through and coming out on the other side where she is now. Mental health still has a huge stigma around the world, especially in the Pakistani and Indian community. But, regardless of where you are in the world, there's still a lot that needs to be openly discussed about mental health. And this conversation that we have is very emotional, is very powerful. And at the end of it, she shares some incredible wisdom with you. And I encourage you to please watch this whole thing. We recorded a video version of it, so you'll be able to actually listen in and watch our conversation together. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please consider heading over to iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe to the Abundant Desi podcast. It's a weekly episode, and most of them are solo episodes, but this was our first conversation with a guest. So if you found this empowering, please consider sharing. And here's our conversation together. Thank you for watching. Annie, thank you so much for being here as the first official guest on the Abundant Desi podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It is an absolute honor. So we're just going to dive right in, and I want you to just share with the Abundant Desi family your superhero origin story. Where you were born, because we have listeners from all over the world, obviously, where you were born and where you are today, and you can just, as you're telling it, we'll kind of go back and put pins and just kind of pick things and talk from there, okay? So whenever you're ready, just...
All right. I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 26 years ago, and I've lived here basically my whole life. And my hero origin story, I've never thought of that before. I was born in a really, really good-natured, humor, comedic family where it was just always a really good situation. So I always had a good family situation, always had good people around me. I was very, very, very privileged to be in that situation because obviously a lot of people aren't born into wonderful situations, but I was. And so I grew up normal, went to school, public school, did everything you were supposed to do, but I became very obvious when I was young, very young, I knew from 2 or 3 that I had pretty severe anxiety. It started out just the natural toddler thing where we have separation anxiety and stuff. And then it became deeper when I started going to school, and I struggled with just getting to school. And when you're a kid, you don't understand what's going on. You just know that you're feeling something, it's scary, and the only thing you know is to be with the things that make you feel safe, which is mom, dad, home, your brothers, which I grew up with 2 brothers, or your animals. And so that was what comforted me, which was just let me stay here. I don't want to be around anybody. And I think too, I've always been someone really hard on myself. So when I was in school, I just always would look around and be like, everyone's smarter than me, everyone's better than me, I can't do this, I don't want to embarrass myself, so I'm just going to stay home. So I think it stemmed from that, but obviously school gets harder the older you get, academically, and also in a million other ways. And I mean, I learned how to deal with stuff as the years went on, but there were definitely times where it was enough to warrant me getting therapy. So my parents put me in talk therapy. And there was even a time when I was 9 that they put me on, I shouldn't say they, but doctors put me on Prozac. And just to kind of get me to school and get me through the day without having severe anxiety attacks and all that stuff. So, but as I got older, it got easier to deal with because you get older and you just kind of understand how things work. And so I started having a better grasp on all things, even though I still was very hard on myself throughout school. I still went through and did what I needed to do, and I got through it. And then when I was 16, my whole entire life changed with everything. My health, my anxiety, everything. It went kind of whee.
So we're gonna really go into that space of what you were going through. But going back to explaining those safe zones, your family, your loved ones, your pets, and stuff like that. For me, when I started going through anxiety, and I never experienced that growing up in Pakistan and growing up even here, is something that most people don't talk about because there's a huge stigma around it. But for me, describing those symptoms felt like a black box. Not only describing the symptoms to other, but then even explaining those to yourself.
Right.
And so a lot of people, for those people who are listening who've never experienced the physical manifestations of what anxiety and depression and other things kind of find themselves, can you talk a little bit about what you were experiencing in regards to like physical symptoms that might have felt really scary at that time?
Well, and that's the thing, when you don't understand always what's happening, you legit think something is physically wrong with you. So I would often think, I'm really sick, so I really need to stay home from school today. I feel physically nauseous. I feel, like I have a fever. I'm shaky. I'm can't catch my breath. I just don't feel well overall. And that's how it first started. So when you do, because anxiety does manifest those physical symptoms, and you do legit think, I'm actually sick, so I have a reason to stay home and be safe. But that's usually
So you said at 16 everything changed, and so now we're going to dive into the actual the diagnosis that came to be of what you had. So the Abundant Desi family that are listening, most people think that when it comes to mental health, it's just depression. That's not the first thing people hear. They hear about anxiety. Panic attacks are still now becoming a thing. People are like, for me, someone who's had panic attacks, and just like you, when someone's like, I couldn't find my keys, I had a panic attack. Sometimes I have to roll my eyes because you don't know what that feels like, right? And so with you, the diagnosis was that you had agoraphobia. And so there's a lot of mental health diagnosis that people don't know about. So again, I encourage people to go and do the research and, kind of break that stigma, because there is people do suffer in silence, and being able to know what people are going through. So can you touch a little bit about what agoraphobia is, and how, when you got diagnosed, what some of the things behind it is?
Well, it manifested because when I was 16, I got really, really, really sick, and we didn't know with what. And it was like a physical, I felt like I had the flu really bad. And at first I thought, oh, I just had the flu. But weeks went by, and then months went by, and I wasn't getting better, and I knew something was wrong. And I was in and out of the doctors, getting blood tests done, seeing specialists, and no one could really quite figure out what was going on with me. And some doctors would guess, oh, I don't know, maybe you're going into mono or something. And so I just wasn't getting answers, which makes you feel 10 times worse, because you're like, what's wrong with me? And then we eventually got a special test done, and it was through some very specific lab, and they said, we're going to test you for food sensitivities. And so I said, okay, never considered that. So I'm like, do you mean a gluten thing? And they're like, kind of, in that realm. And took the test. Then a huge list of stuff came back, you are sensitive to this, to this, to this. Basically everything you eat and drink. So in my head I went, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? Just eat air and drink water? It was really strange, and it was scary, and I'm going, I have an answer, but I don't know what to do with this information. I've never heard anybody who's had to deal with this. They sent me to a nutritionist. She helped me kind of look for certain things like alternatives. You can get this here. This should be, replace this, just so I could eat, because obviously you need to eat to survive. But as time went on, it became a psychosomatic thing. So I started developing obsessive compulsive disorder. I knew right away kind of what was going on. I had some OCD issues when I was growing up, but nothing to this extreme. I just never thought I would actually full on develop it. And it was a pretty scary thing. I sat in my room kind of doing these weird repetitions and having extreme superstitions about stuff. And with OCD, it's not real. But there's another part of your brain that's going, yes, but just in case. Do this tap this however many times, 42 times, just in case. Because if you don't, my thought process was you'll get sick. Or if I was wearing a certain shirt and I had a food reaction that day, I would never wear that shirt again. Because I genuinely believed if I wear this red sweatshirt, I will get sick. So it went into that. And then I obviously, like I mentioned before, the food stuff became a psychosomatic stuff. I was eliminating more and more foods from my diet. And I was already a pretty thin girl, as you know, but I was losing even more weight. That's not healthy. And I was 16 and probably 90 something pounds, which isn't good. And as the years went on, it became, I was just so scared to do everything, basically. I was scared of my own body. I was scared of my own mind. I was scared to eat. I was scared to drink. I was scared to, it really limits like the things you do throughout the day too, like going out to eat with your friends, going to the movies, going to weddings, graduation parties, just main events or just gatherings in general. I couldn't eat the stuff that people were giving out. I couldn't fully enjoy myself because I started developing panic attacks, which the first one I had I didn't realize was a panic attack. I thought something was physically wrong with me. Very different from an anxiety attack. They're on different levels, related, but cousins, different levels.
Yes, exactly.
And then it obviously went into agoraphobia, as you mentioned, which was not something I was really familiar with. And I remember the middle of my junior year of high school, it got to the point where I was so sick that I couldn't focus in school anymore. My OCD and my panic attacks were just awful to the point where I couldn't do my work. I couldn't socialize normally. I would go from class to class with a panic attack. And this was junior year, so I was taking AP courses and I was getting ready for college and I was teaching a preschool for extra credit. I was doing all this stuff and I was having these severe panic attacks. And I remember bringing up to my parents, you know, I don't know if I can do this. I feel sick and awful every single day and I'm just, all these things are happening in me. And their first response was, well, no, you got to finish high school. And I said, well, I don't want to drop out. I just need to find another way to finish high school. And they thought, you're so close, just, you know, soldier on. And I understood what they were saying. But I also knew deep down something severe was happening. And nothing that anybody could really truly explain. Like, I couldn't explain it. My parents couldn't explain it. Everyone wanted me to be okay, but there was all this stuff going on. So then eventually it got so bad that doctors even started suggesting maybe you should homeschool your daughter. And so I finished the remainder of my junior and senior year through my high school's homeschool program. And it wasn't ideal. Obviously, I wanted to be like my friends and stick with it and do the normal stuff, you know, start driving, get a job, do all that kind of fun stuff, normal stuff that you do when you're growing up, at least in our culture. And I just wasn't hitting those milestones. I wasn't doing those quote unquote normal things. And then the agoraphobia happened. And I don't know, it wasn't so much, I don't think the homeschool kind of like triggered it because I was at home more. I thought being at home more, I could take care of myself better. And I was. I was able to do things that maybe I didn't have time for because of school and everything. But it became my safe zone. And I knew it just kind of became an excuse, like I can't go here and there because I feel this way. Or I can't go out to eat with you. I'm not going to be able to eat anything. Whatever it was. And this was the thing though too. I wanted to eat. I was hungry. I would get so sad and frustrated if I sat down for, you know, a Thanksgiving dinner and everyone around me is just piling on food on their plates and just shoving it in their mouths and I'm sitting there with nothing. I felt like one of those poor kids looking through a window like, feed me stuff, please. And it just became that. And I was just like, it just made me angry. So I didn't want to go to fun places like restaurants and movie theaters because I was like, I can't enjoy myself. I'm going to be sitting there starving the whole time. It's not fun when you're hungry. People get that hangry thing. People get that thing where they're just like, you're just not yourself when you're hungry. And so basically, it went on for 7 years, and I was starving for 7 years. I was so hungry. I just wanted to eat, but my mind kept telling me, nope, can't have this, nope, can't have that. Because I legit would have physical symptoms if I would eat something, because my brain kind of would just, it's a powerful thing, it would just tell you stuff. This is gonna make you sick. And then you eat it, oh, I'm sick. So I legit became a shut-in. I wasn't, and you remember this too, like it took everything in me, even to go to your wedding, to come and see you. Most time you had to come see me. Yeah. And it's embarrassing, it's shameful. And people who haven't seen you for a while, like friends, and they contact you, hey, I haven't seen you, why haven't I seen you? And it's shameful to be like, oh, well, you know, I'm going through stuff. And obviously, like, depression came with all that stuff because you're experiencing all these weird emotions, all these weird things going on in your body and your mind, and you just don't know what to do with yourself, and you don't understand why you're that way. You don't understand why you can't be like this person or that person, and why you're not getting the same experiences as the people around you. You're watching your friends do things you're supposed to be doing and you're not doing it. So that was hard, and it was hard for my family to explain to people, where's Annie? Well, you know, this is going on. And people didn't always understand.
I, first of all, want to thank you and commend you for being so vulnerable, because you are just like laying it out there. Because a lot of this stuff, people are like you said, you were shameful, but now you're able to like really, and we're really going to dive into, you know, talking about don't suffer in silence and all that stuff. But one thing that a lot of stuff you were saying was just like hitting home, but something that you said that really was profound. And again, I went through anxiety, I went through panic attacks, you went through something way more serious, but still, you know, like, we were having some similar symptoms in regards to, you know, being like, okay, this is what's causing this, is what's causing this. So one thing that I say all the time when it comes to anxiety, kind of like with business and personal development and fitness, is that analysis paralysis. You overanalyze everything and then you paralyze yourself. So what I was going through is things like, I had a panic attack at maybe a grocery store. I cannot go to that grocery store again. I'll have a panic attack. Or I had a really good day, and at the end of the day, I had a horrible panic attack. And I would go back, what did I eat today? Who was I with? What was I doing? You know, you start analyzing every single thing. And so what ends up happening is the people that are around you that sometimes help through it. And sometimes people don't have that support system of people understanding. So one big question that comes up over and over again, because my wonderful wife, Crystal, she was my rock, and she always has been. She's my light at the end of the tunnel. She would tell me, Arsalan, it's not the grocery store that's causing it. It's not that. She would really walk me through it, essentially, and like really help me through it. So one thing that I really want people to listen in on, this is a really important thing. If you personally are not going through things that are like anxiety or depression or any other mental health issues, because a lot of people don't, you know, have to deal with that at any time in their life. If you're not going through that, you may know someone. You may have a family member, a colleague, you know, your child might be going through this. What are some things that you, now having gone through it, what are some things that you would maybe coach or advise these individuals what you should or shouldn't say to someone to really help them cope through that difficult moment?
I know a big one for me personally was if I told someone, you know, I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that, they go, well, it's just me. You know, you shouldn't feel that way because you're with me. And I said, I could be with like the most famous person in the world that I'm obsessed with, and I'm still gonna panic. It doesn't matter how much I love you, how much you make me feel safe. Whatever's going on in here inside of me, it's gonna do what it wants. So a big thing is to just understand that you can't always control what's happening inside that person. You may, and I felt like, I don't know if I'm speaking for people, but when people would say like that stuff to me, I feel like they were offended, like, but it's just me. And I didn't want them to feel that way. It had nothing to do with that at all. But I just want people to know that it has nothing to do with that person specifically. It's just a person is fighting something. They're in a battle and they're fighting so hard. And it has nothing to do necessarily with the environment around them. It's just everything that they're trying so hard to do mentally and physically. Another one too is, snap out of it. You're fine.
That's a big one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a lot of men in my family, and no offense to them because they've been extremely influential in my life, and you know all of them. They're amazing, and I love them. But the masculine men in my family tend to say, oh, that's weak. Oh, you can't, I would never feel that way. Just snap out of it. It's no big deal. And my dad has even said this, and we've had many talks about it, where he's an extremely strong person. He's not someone I've ever seen struggle with anything. He just pulls himself up by the bootstraps and he just gets stuff done. He just works hard, puts his head down, gets it done. He doesn't know what it's like to experience that intense stuff. He has no idea. So many times when I was growing up, he'd be like, well, why can't you just do this? Why can't you do that? And I had explained to him, and it took a while, but I had explained, it's not something I can control. This is something that's happening. I personally feel I was born this way. I was born neurotic. I've talked to many therapists about it, and they said, some brains are just wired that way. Some people can randomly develop it at a random time in their life, which I know you had. I remember when you first started going through it, you were texting me, what's wrong with me? And I kept telling you nothing's wrong with you. And I also remember you saying, it always stood out to me too, you went, I just want to say I'm sorry because I had no idea what you went through. And I remember you said that, and I was like, I've never heard anyone say that before. Because it is weird to see someone go through something that you've always gone through, and now they're experiencing it, and now they're going, oh my God. And it's like a weird thing too, though, because it's not a good thing, but it makes you feel like you can really help someone. And I know we're like the best of friends ever, and it's really easy for us to just say anything to each other. So that helps. But I think just knowing that you have someone on your side and that they're not forcing you not to feel that way, just knowing that, okay, this is what's happening. What can we do about it? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to get some fresh air? Do you want, what can we do? And sometimes that's all you need in that moment. And obviously, some people have it more severe, like my situation. Some people need extra help, and I had to get that. It wasn't enough, and I knew that. I would tell my parents, I need way more help than just talk therapy. This may work for a lot of people, but I can tell you straight up, this isn't going to do anything for me. Nothing. I knew I needed more.
And we are going to jump into what the more was here. So one thing, again, you're talking and I'm sitting here like nodding my head. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, please go to YouTube and watch the video of this, because we are like really, you can just see the emotions in Annie's face right now as I'm talking. So you totally covered into a territory that is something that I have dealt with my entire life. And for people listening from Pakistan, India, let's really talk about the mask of masculinity, where the mask of like, hey, we are men, we do not show weakness, you should never show weakness. If you show weakness, you are not a man. I love all the men in my life.
I even told myself that I'm not a man. Like, I would tell myself that all the time, but I'm like...
Yeah, exactly. So like, I have men in my life who are amazing. My brothers, my dad, none of them, excluding my younger brother, Zishan, who's very similar in like his personality in regards to creativity like me. But when I was going through that stuff, going back to people that you can confide in, I couldn't really talk to my family about it because no one had ever experienced that. And so if I did, they'd be like, you're just going through a really tough patch, or just man up. In a way, man up. You can't show weakness and stuff like that. So that is I'm so glad you touched on that, because again, the stigma around mental health, and when it comes to like, what is it, like mental health doesn't, it's what's the phrase I'm looking for? It doesn't have a bias, or it's not like it could attack anyone, right? Like it doesn't choose, it doesn't care like what your race is, what your sex is, what it could happen to anyone. But that's what happens, is a lot of people suffer in silence because they're afraid to open up to the people that they're closest to them. So again, encouraging folks to just go find your community and people that you can talk to. So again, I went through what I went through. I'm able to really like tackle and slay when it comes to knowing what works for me and what doesn't. I've taken more of the natural approach because it's for me. I know I can focus on nutrition and movement and hydration. But like you said, that doesn't work for everyone because it gets to a point where you may just need some extra help. Yeah. And I'm trying to teach the Abundant Desi family that if you are going through something extremely serious, it is going to happen where you may just have a chemical imbalance, and that is fine. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's no stigma that can hold you back because you are phenomenal and you should be able to go and get help. So tell me a little bit about how when you discovered the help you needed, and feel free to dive into what you had to do to get to from that point to where you are now.
Right. So by this point, I think I was about 19, 20, in that early 20 stage. And I had obviously by this point been completely homebound, eating less and less, losing more and more weight, which isn't good. And obviously I was seeing therapists, but again, because I couldn't leave the house, it was hard to go physically and see them. So sometimes I was doing over the phone or over Skype. And again, wasn't enough. I needed way more intense therapy. I knew this, but it's hard to ask for that help. And when you're that sick, it's hard to always recognize that because really all you're trying to do every day is just survive. You don't think like, I'm going to treat myself today. You don't think about that stuff. You just go, I have to survive today. And literally it became to a point where I had to survive. Physically, I got down to 74 pounds and I was dying. And it was the most disturbing place I've ever been in my life because I would see my body and it was disgusting. I looked like a Holocaust victim. And I knew looking at myself in the mirror, I'm dying. I know I am. And it got to the point where I wasn't living anymore. I wasn't being myself anymore. My parents were scared to find me on the couch, not awake. My mom would hold her breath every morning to come find me because she didn't know. And it got to the point where when you are that malnourished and that sick, your brain starts shutting down, your organs start shutting down, everything starts just shutting down. You're dying. And I remember this happened where I actually went to my dad. And I told him this because I was extremely disturbed. I said, I don't want to live anymore. I'm thinking of killing myself. And I remember you guys had also found out that day. I think my mom told you guys. And you guys came over, and I remember I was just trying so hard to be how you guys knew me, which is just ha 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 ha. But I knew you guys were there because you knew what was going on, like you and your wife. And my brothers knew, and everyone was getting really scared. And my dad immediately knew, okay, I think you need to go to the hospital. I mean, this is getting to the point now where this is just stupid. We're watching you die. And suicide is an extremely disturbing, horrible thing, not just to have the thoughts, but I've recently lost 2 friends to suicide. And it's extremely, extremely awful. There's really no words for it. But I understood both of these friends were extremely sick. And they weren't probably getting the proper help that they needed. And it's just like a weird thing, but I think it's, again, comes back to the masculinity thing. They were guys, they were men, and I think they were too ashamed to ask for the help, to admit they had struggles. And I think that was a major way of why they went through it. And statistically, more men go through it than women. I was just scared that I was having those thoughts. I knew I didn't want to live anymore, but I also knew I don't want to feel this way anymore. That's why. That is the only reason that I want to feel this way. I even was planning it out, how I was going to do it, where I was going to do it. And I was so disturbed by that I told my parents, and immediately they knew, all right, let's go to the hospital. So I was taken to the hospital, and I believe I was in there for 3 days. It's very hazy. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, nothing. I was severely underweight. They ran a bunch of tests on me. I had a bunch of IVs hooked up to me. Honestly, it's very hazy. I have to ask my parents a lot of times, like, what happened, because I don't totally remember. When you're that malnourished, you start sometimes your brain starts making stuff up. You're seeing things, and I didn't have hallucinations as much, but definitely stuff where I was like, was that real? But I was in the hospital enough to where I had the psychiatric department coming up to my room in the hospital going, there's more to this. They said, we believe you have an eating disorder. And I went, what are you talking about? No, I don't. I said, they're like, oh, so you've never like forced yourself to throw up? I said, never. I hate throwing up. They go, but you starve yourself. I go, I don't want to. If you gave me a whole plate of every food on the planet, I would eat it gladly and be 300 pounds. It's fine. And they're going, okay, but you're not eating. And I explained why. And they said, but we did all these tests. Nothing's wrong with you. I go, but I went to these doctors years ago and they were saying all this stuff. And they said, well, you may have grown out of it. Your body is probably readjusted. They didn't quite know. This hospital in particular was maybe a little more judgmental towards me, which you do experience sometimes in certain fields. You don't always have well-intentioned people. My friend explained it when I was talking to him about it. He said, so they just seemed like business as usual people. They come in, don't really care about you, just kind of go, this is you, move along. So I didn't feel very understood while I was there. And when they told me I had an eating disorder, I'm like, you're crazy. I've never purposefully starved myself. I've never wanted to be thin. I've never like looked in the mirror and be like, I don't like this or this or this. But then I had to have some people come in and explain, which made way more sense, which was you have an atypical eating disorder. Yes, you're not doing this on purpose, and this is extremely rare, but you have an atypical eating disorder because you are 74 pounds. That's not normal. And all these things that come with being severely malnourished happened to me. Everything, for a woman especially, my period stopped. I wasn't going to the bathroom properly anymore. You become severely constipated. Just a million things. You get dehydrated. You start feeling pain in your body, your kidneys, because they're shutting down. So a lot of that stuff happened, and they ended up committing me to the psychiatric unit and at the University of Iowa. And for a while, I had to go upstairs into this initial hospital because they were waiting for a bed to open up at the university. And up there, they were not at all educated on what to do for me. They kept calling the university, what do we give her? How do we treat this? And I'm thinking in the back of my head, you don't know how to treat the deadliest mental illness in the world and you're a psychiatric hospital? And I kept thinking, this is crazy. They don't even have specific sections. I have to go to a specific university to get that help for something that kills people. And they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to treat me. They just a lot of them were great, but a lot of them kind of poo-pooed me. Like, whatever, you're just this. You're just an anorexic. You're a crazy anorexic. That's at least the message I was getting from people. And which made me extremely intimidated because I was going, I have to go to the University of Iowa for I don't even know how long, and I have to deal with more people like this. Are you kidding me? I don't want to do this. So obviously that was in the back of my head, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do any of this. But essentially, I was locked away and eventually was taken to the University of Iowa, which was 1,000 times better experience than I could ever possibly imagine. The people there were incredible. The nurses, the doctors, even the people in the hospital with me. And it wasn't specifically for eating disorder patients. I was rooming with people who were schizophrenic, or people with PTSD, or people with borderline personality disorder or bipolar. Just people in these really, really, really tough situations in life, whatever it was. And I became friends with these people, and the entire experience transformed my whole entire life. I became the old me again, which I had no idea left. I always told people, like, when I started finally eating and feeling better, that little version of me came back and I was like, oh, there you are. Like, where did you go? I had no idea. This level of my humor came back that I had no idea left. And the nurses would keep telling me, pulling me aside, this is our favorite part, is watching these people come back to themselves, being normal again, their brains functioning again. And I worked and worked and worked. I was in there for a few months, and I got back to a normal weight again, which I hadn't been in for I don't know how long, 7.5 years. And it was an extremely transformative time, and there was just so much going on, and it really felt like a spiritual experience. Stuff that you can't always explain to people, but I was definitely experiencing things that I was just like, wow, you can't explain that one.
That is, thank you for really diving in. That was so powerful, the whole thing. And going back to when you were talking about suicide, something that immediately stood out to me is most people, when they talk about suicide, they ask people like, what's going on? And typically the answer is, it's not that I don't want to live. Right. It's just that I don't want to live like this. Right. And then that's where you really need to seek the help. And, and as, again, for those of you listening, Annie really listed off some things like schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder. So again, the stigma around mental health is there's not enough awareness. Everyone knows what kind of heart disease people have or what kind of diabetes, there's diabetes. But when it comes to mental health, there's so many different things people are going through, and each and every single one of them can be helped. Yeah. You can find the help for it. So you just went through a whole transformation of where you were and where you are now. And going back to when your mom called us and started talking and whatnot, I told your mom something on the phone that was very profound for her, and she kind of teared up. And I'm sitting here and witnessing what I had told her. I'm sitting here looking at that thing that I was telling her about. And what I had told your mom on the phone is, Annie's going through something really difficult right now. This is going to be a big transformation in her life. But the version of Annie that is going to come out on the other side is going to be this empowered, this phenomenal, this beautiful soul that is going to be a combination of what she has gone through. This moment right here is not what defines her. This is what's just helping her get to that version. And your mom started tearing up, and she's like, I certainly hope you're right. Yeah. And if she was sitting here, I would be like, look at Annie right now. You are so in line, you're so empowered, and you're just radiating with so much, you exude so much energy and passion about the whole topic of mental health and helping others. So going off of that, I know you have something exciting that's actually going to be launching the day this episode comes out. Yeah. Can you share with the Abundant Desi family what you want to do now and what is in store for Annie moving forward? So
I had the idea because I always wanted personally a place to go where I felt at ease and comfortable, and I could not necessarily forget about stuff, but just learn how to accept what's going on inside of me, because I still deal with anxiety. I still have OCD. I still have panic attacks. I still deal with that stuff. It's gotten better because therapy, medication, all these severe, intense help that I got and received, and I'm still getting. Because you're like a car, it's fine-tuning. You have to constantly, make sure you're up to date on everything. So, and that's a challenge in itself. But I always wanted a place, an environment to go where I felt comfortable, safe, understood. And so I decided to start small and start launching an Instagram page called Coziety, which is cozy and anxiety put together.
Please go give Annie some love on her Instagram page and everywhere she is, and make sure to use the hashtag #HelloDose so she feels welcome. And if you have any questions, and if you want to dive more deeply into the topic of mental health, please, I know she has an open community as well, and she wants to connect with you. And so the last question I have for you as we wrap up is, this is called the Abundant Desi, and we are talking about abundance. And abundance isn't just about money or wealth. Abundance is really sharing what is within you and going out and being the light for others. Whether it is being abundant with your creativity, with your wealth, with your time. What is abundance to you when it comes to being an abundant person?
I think abundance to me, the main thing about life, which can wrap up abundance, is just that we're supposed to be there for each other. No matter what we go through, no matter what other people are going through, we're just supposed to be there to support each other and also entertain each other. And I think that's what abundance is just knowing that we're there for each other. And even when you go through terrible stuff, just know that with that, you can use that to help many people, or even just one person. It doesn't matter. you're helping somebody. So just knowing that you take what you go through and giving back, being there for people, and abundance and creativity go together for me. So just entertaining people in whatever capacity, because I'm a very creative person, so I love doing that for people and then giving a message within it. So I think that's what abundance means to me.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, and
Thank
thank you for allowing me the honor of coming to this platform and sharing your story as our first guest. And again, go follow her. She's an amazing writer, and as she says, she's extremely creative. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to her, reach out to me, and we'll connect. But in the meantime, my those, my friends, have an amazing day, stay abundant, and go out and be amazing.